Dad wanted to marry his young GF just 2 weeks after my mom passed away and forced me to go to the wedding, saying he'd kick me out if I didn't. So I did something that would make him regret his words. My father has always been awful to me. Ever since I was a little kid, it was obvious he didn't want to be a dad. But I could never figure out which he hated more, being married to my mom or being a father to me. I think he must have hated both equally because he didn't treat my mom any better than he treated me. I turned 17 a couple of months ago, and just 4 weeks back I lost my mom. It wasn't unexpected. She had been battling lung cancer for a while, and she finally passed away in the hospital 4 weeks ago. She was diagnosed 3 years ago, and since then it felt like I had been holding my breath, and when she passed away, I think I finally let it all go. She was my best friend, and even now, it still feels so weird not having her around. Most importantly, she was the only one who protected me from my father. I grew up in a house where my parents fought every single day over something or other. It was clear they didn't love each other, and honestly, I don't even know why they stayed married. Every time I asked my mom why she married him, she'd say they loved each other at some point. They'd always patch things up, but I could never forgive my dad as quickly as my mom did. I told her to leave him so many times, because during their fights, he'd say the most awful things to her. He'd say stuff like how he regretted ever being with her and having a kid with her, and how he wished she'd die from her disease so he could move on with his life. I kept telling her to leave, but she just wouldn't, and I have no idea why. As for me, I wanted to leave ever since I was 4 years old, but I had nowhere else to go and no other family either. My mom was an orphan who lost her parents in an accident when she was little and was raised by her grandma, who died when she was in college. She didn't have any other family she kept in touch with, and I didn't know my dad's side of the family because he never took us to meet them. He said he didn't get along with his family, which is why he didn't want us to meet them. There was no explanation, and I was too scared to ask him. I was used to getting yelled at for stuff, so I wasn't going to stir up trouble by poking into something like that. Anyway, my parents were the only family I had, which is why I had to deal with my dad because my mom refused to leave. After she passed away, I was devastated, but my dad just went about his business like nothing had even happened. It didn't surprise me at all because even when she was sick, he acted the same way. I didn't expect him to care because I knew he didn't love anybody. He was probably not even capable of that. But what really threw me off is that just 2 weeks after my mom had passed away, once we were done with the funeral stuff, my dad brought home a much younger woman. She was just there, one morning, sipping coffee in our living room. And when I finally got the guts to ask my dad who she was, he told me that she was my new mom, apparently. He also had the biggest smile on his face, probably his creepiest one yet, when he was telling me that. Despite myself, I couldn't help but comment on it, and I told him that it was a bit too soon to bring home his girlfriend since it had been just 2 weeks since my mom had passed away. And that earned me a lecture from him about how this was going to be my stepmom in a few days, and so I needed to respect her. He told me he didn't care that I just lost my mom, and I still had to respect her and treat her just like I did my own mom. I was totally pissed off and tried to argue with him, but then he dropped another bombshell on me and said he was getting married. He said that ever since my mom got diagnosed, he knew she wouldn't make it because she'd always been weak and fragile ever since he'd known her. So he started looking for replacements. That's literally the word he used. Since then, and he'd been with Melissa, his girlfriend, for the past 2 years. He told me that now that my mom was finally out of the way, he was going to get married again, and he was going to make sure her passing didn't mess up his life at all. It finally made sense why he'd been so unaffected by my mom's sickness and death, because he'd already replaced her. I was totally disgusted and honestly just repulsed by him, and I told him I wouldn't be going to the wedding, and I expected him to say he was cool with that because honestly, why would he care? But then, he told me it was necessary for me to be there. That caught me off guard, and when I asked him why, he told me that only if I showed up would he be able to make this seem normal and acceptable to other people. Apparently, according to him, me being at the wedding would mean I'd accepted it. And if his own daughter didn't have a problem with this marriage, nobody else would have any reason to comment on it either. So basically, he needed me there to make it seem less messed up, which in itself was pretty psychotic. I honestly believed my dad had lost his mind, since not only was he saying such weird and senseless things, but he was also getting married just 2 weeks after his wife had passed away, without caring about what other people would say. And not just that, the woman marrying him was just a couple of years older than me. She was 25 at most, I don't know her exact age, but she couldn't be older than that, and my dad is in his late 40s. It's creepy enough as it is, That the fact that this guy is somebody who recently lost his wife to cancer and should be grieving right now, but is instead getting married, and expecting his daughter to pretend like this is all normal and that she supports it. It's a total recipe for disaster, and I really think that he belongs in a straitjacket, in a padded room. When he told me that he was marrying Melissa, I told him that there was no way I could be attending this wedding, and if he wanted to get offended at that, he was welcome to do so. But then he told me that he would not just be getting offended, he would be kicking me out if I did not attend. And he would also make sure that I did not get access to the college fund that he and my mom had been setting aside for me ever since I was born. I thought that it was majorly unfair because, like he had said, it was not just his money that had gone into the college fund, but also my mom's, and I believed that I was entitled to it. But unfortunately, I couldn't make him hand over that money to me since it's not required by law to do so. It's not like he had set it up specifically for that use since there were no documents to prove it. So basically, if I did not attend that wedding, I would be getting kicked out, and I wouldn't have any prospects of going to college either. I was in a really tough spot because, on one hand, I did not want to seem like I was part of this, or that I was encouraging this insanity in any way whatsoever. But on the other hand, I also had to look out for myself, because there were still a couple of months to go before I left for college, and I couldn't afford to lose out on money since I did not have any of my own. And it would take some time for my mom's will to get processed, and only then would I get the inheritance. So for now, it didn't seem like I had any other choice but to go to the wedding and act like I was on board with my dad. I found out about the wedding last week, but honestly, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. So I figured I had to pull out all the stops to put a stop to this, or at least try to do something. To his face, I told my dad that I'd be at the wedding, but then I started hunting for something, anything, to mess up what was going on because I just couldn't let this happen. I honestly didn't even know what I was looking for, I just wanted something. And I got insanely lucky, like a miracle, when my dad left his laptop unattended. He and Melissa went out for dinner a couple of days back to celebrate their upcoming wedding, and I was home alone. My dad had left his laptop on the coffee table. I didn't expect much when I opened it since it was locked, so I just tried to guess the password, and amazingly, I got it right. It was Melissa's name, followed by his own birthday, which was weirdly shocking. Anyway, once I was in, I could barely even believe it. I started going through his social media, and at first I found nothing. But then I realized that he had two profiles on Facebook, and I decided to check out the other one, which I hadn't seen before. To my surprise, that was his secret account just for his side of the family. He had been telling my mom and me that he didn't get along with his family, but here he was on his other profile, hanging out with people we had never seen before, who looked like they were definitely related to him. The more I scrolled, the more photos I found, going back years. It was super obvious that he had been in touch with his family all along. He had just been lying to us. So I decided to snoop through his messages on that account and discovered he'd been talking to his parents for ages. I bet he had another phone too. He'd been living a double life from the start, and no one had any idea. My mom and I were totally in the dark about all this, and even if she knew, she never let me in on it. I'm pretty sure his family didn't even know I existed. After reading his chats with his dad on his account, it hit me that his dad thought he was just away for work, nothing more. Little did he know, he had a whole other family here. I snapped some photos of those conversations and switched to my phone, ready to talk to my grandpa. I was super nervous because this was all so crazy, I could hardly believe it myself. But I headed to my room, logged into my own Facebook, and reached out to the profile I saw on my dad's account. Just like I thought, we had no mutual friends, which is why I never found him before. I didn't even know my grandpa's real name all these years, so tracking these people down was impossible. Now that I had his account, I messaged him right away and tried to explain everything as fast as I could. I gave him my phone number and told him to call me ASAP because it was an emergency. I sent along some screenshots of the chats, explaining how I found his profile, and also sent some photos of me with my parents, so he'd know this wasn't a prank. I didn't hear back for the next 12 hours, and I was about to give up, thinking maybe he thought it was a prank and decided to ignore me. But when my dad was at work, I finally got a call from my grandfather. I was just lucky that he hadn't talked to my dad about this yet and had called me first. Anyway, as soon as he called, I picked up my phone and told him what was going on. He told me that for the past 17 years, he had been led to believe that my dad was living away from Iowa, where he was originally from, for his job. He had even visited his son several times, and apparently my dad had a separate house and everything set up here, which is where my grandparents stayed whenever they visited him. They had no clue about any of this until the past 12 hours, when they were just trying to recover from the shock of it all. At first, this all seemed like a prank to them, but when they saw my mom in the family photos that I had sent, they realized it was all true. Apparently, the reason my dad had never told his parents about his marriage and the family he had was because he had told them he had broken up with my mom since they didn't approve of her. 18 years back, when my parents had initially started dating, my grandparents made it very clear that they didn't want my dad to marry my mom, so he told them he had dumped her, and that's the lie he had been telling for the past 2 decades. But now, he had finally been caught. The reason my grandparents didn't want my dad to marry my mom was pretty serious. It was because my mom had apparently been trying to cheat on him, and they accused her of being a gold digger. That was because the first time my dad brought my mom home to meet his parents, she immediately tried to hit on his older brother since he was a surgeon and obviously earned way more than my dad. However, my grandparents found out about it because my uncle refused to keep his mouth shut about something so serious. And they had demanded that my dad break up with my mom, but he refused to do so. And I think that it was because of me because according to my calculations, my mom was probably already pregnant by then. And then, my parents gave him an ultimatum that he could either break up with my mom or they would cut him out of their lives since they knew that if they cut him off, my mom would leave him because they believed that she was just with him for the money. My dad eventually told them that he had broken things off with my mom, but clearly not since they continued to stay together, and that's why I'm here. I don't know why they stayed together if my mom had actually done such things, and this completely changed my view of both my parents. Anyway, once I found out about these things, I told my grandparents how poorly I was being treated and that I couldn't count on anybody else. But now that I knew that they existed and I wasn't as alone as I had initially thought, I was counting on them for help. But if they turned their backs on me, I would still understand. Thankfully, they chose to help me out and I was able to stop the wedding from happening, and I got back at my dad as well, and so did his parents. They flew down here a couple of days ago, and yesterday I managed to sneak them into the wedding, and all of a sudden, we were the guests of honor. The wedding was being held in our backyard since only a couple of people were attending. It was meant to be a small and intimate ceremony. It was just my dad's coworkers and employer, a couple of his friends, and that was it. Obviously, he had not invited his family. They hadn't even been invited to his first wedding, but I made it possible for them to attend the second. After Melissa had walked down the aisle and everything, I texted my grandparents, and I told them that it was finally time for them to show up because I wanted to stop this before the vows happened. Right before the vows, I snuck out, and then it was my turn to walk down the aisle with my grandparents, just for the theatrics of it all. As soon as my dad saw me walking down the aisle with his folks, his face dropped, and Melissa looked pretty confused too. Once I got close to him, I told him straight up that I had finally uncovered all his lies and now his parents knew the truth. So he could say goodbye to his inheritance because that was not coming to him anymore. It was all coming to me instead. And I didn't need him anymore either, since I already had a place to live and people to take care of me, and also my college fund. So he could do whatever he wanted, since I knew that he was a liar and I didn't wish to be associated with him. After that, I walked away with my grandparents, and since then, we've been living in a hotel, preparing to head back. There's a lot of catching up that I have to do with my grandparents since I haven't known these people, and there's also so much to talk about regarding my parents. The only reason we haven't returned yet is because this morning, my dad finally contacted my grandfather and told him that what he did was just not right, and he had apparently accused his parents of trying to control him his entire life and never letting him be happy. He also accused me of trying to ruin him by showing up at the wedding like that, saying that I just couldn't stand to see him happy with anybody else. He's blaming us all because now Melissa is refusing to talk to him, and the wedding was obviously called off yesterday itself, just after we had left. So yeah, for showing up to my dad's second wedding with his parents and exposing him for being a liar. Update 1. Hey, it's been 4 days since the wedding got called off. My grandparents and I decided not to respond to my dad. He does not deserve it. If he wants to speak to us, he knows where to find us. We're still hanging out at the hotel, and we've given him all the info about it. We told him if he wants to talk things out, he can swing by and we'll chat face to face because this isn't the kind of convo we want to have over the phone or through texts. He still hasn't shown up, and there's only 3 days left before I head back to Low with my grandparents. They've got a farm there, they're doing pretty well, and I'll be taken care of way better than I was here. They promised they'd make sure I get into the college I want and I won't have to struggle after all this. My grandparents have been totally spoiling me since we got to know each other, and I think they're trying to make up for lost time, which is really sweet of them. They couldn't stand my mom, and after all this, they can't stand my dad either, but they sure seem to love me a lot. So update 2, my grandparents and I are set to leave in 2 days. This morning, my dad finally decided to come see us and talk. I was pretty shocked to see him in my grandparents' hotel room when they called me this morning, but I got over it quick, and I decided I wasn't going to talk to him at all until he apologized. But obviously, that's too much to ask from someone like him. He was only there to complain about how unfair it was that my grandparents decided to cut him out of their lives and give all the inheritance to me instead. He said he'd already lost his wife, my mom, and he'd lost Melissa too. I didn't want to talk to him anymore either, so things were already pretty rough for him. And to make matters worse, all the wedding guests, his coworkers, and close friends are now acting weird around him because of what went down at the wedding. So his reputation is totally trashed, and he's even thinking about quitting his job because he doesn't think he can handle such a hostile work environment. To put it mildly, he's lost pretty much everything he had just a few days ago, but then we showed up at the wedding, exposed him, and totally wrecked his plans. So the least we could do was let him keep the inheritance he'd been working towards all these years, because honestly, that's why he lied to us for so long in the first place. But he just wanted to make everyone happy, which is why he started spinning those lies, and he promised he was going to come clean to his parents after marrying my mom. But as time went on, it just got more and more awkward to bring it up, so he had to keep up the lies and juggle this crazy double life. He claimed he was the victim here because, after all, it was his happiness everyone was against, including his own parents. So now he's just here to demand what he thinks is rightfully his, the inheritance, since I'd be taken care of anyway, but he'd been hopping for this and working towards it from the start. And it was totally unfair to yank it away from him for such a petty reason. I was already fed up with the way he was acting all victimized, and when he said he deserved that inheritance, I completely lost it. Before my grandparents could even get a word in, I blew up at him and told him that if he really deserved that inheritance, then I deserved to be treated like a human being for the past 17 years. But he never showed me any kind of love or affection, or even the basic respect, and he actually threatened to kick me out and use my college fund for his own personal stuff if I didn't go along with his craziness, and support his marriage to his young girlfriend just 2 weeks after I lost my mom. If he couldn't give me what I deserved, it was only fair that his parents took away what he thought he deserved. He was totally taken aback by how I acted because I'd never been able to stand up to my dad before, but now with my grandparents backing me up, I wasn't scared of him anymore. He even tried to glare at me, which used to work when I was little, trying to shut me down. But this time, I wasn't going to stay quiet and let him walk all over me. Before, I'd only do that because I knew my mom wouldn't leave no matter what, probably for the same reason my dad didn't cut ties with his parents. It was all about the money, which turned out to be pretty useless in the end since she passed away. She's just lucky she died in a good hospital. But aside from that, there was no benefit to her sticking with my dad after her diagnosis. Anyway, when I wouldn't shut up, my dad tried to yell at me and shut me down, but my grandparents were there to remind him that this wasn't going to fly anymore. After some arguing, he finally had to leave because my grandparents threatened to call security on him and have him escorted out. They made it crystal clear to him that he wasn't going to get anything until he owned up to his mistakes. And even then, it would take a lot for them to forgive him, and if I decided I wanted to keep the inheritance for myself, he wasn't going to get anything anyway. So he left, acting like a child, throwing a tantrum, and promised that he was going to make us pay for what we'd done to him. I don't know what he thought he was doing. He probably thought acting like that would scare us, but it really didn't. It just made us even more sure that we were doing the right thing by not forgiving him. And he wasn't even sorry, so we couldn't even forgive him. I'm glad I'm moving in with my grandparents in a couple of days because I just want to get away from all of this now. I'm definitely going to miss my friends, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm heading to college this fall after graduating high school, and I'm just over all of this now. So it's been a year since I left home. Hey, update 3. The last few months have been crazy busy with college stuff, which is why I haven't posted anything. I totally spaced on it. Anyway, after that huge fight with my dad in the hotel room, like I mentioned last time, my grandparents and I took off. We didn't talk to my dad for the next few weeks after that. But on the bright side, I got to meet a bunch of people from my dad's side of the family, and they all love me. I feel like this is the family I've always deserved. My mom probably tried to love me, but she was too wrapped up in herself, and in the end, it hurt me more than it hurt her. My uncle told me not to sweat my college tuition because he's got it covered, and that's been a huge weight off my shoulders. These folks had only known me for a few weeks, but they decided right away they were going to give me all the love I'd missed out on for the past 17 years, and I couldn't be more grateful. I didn't get to hang out with them much because a few months after moving in with my grandparents, I had to head off to college. But it's cool because my college is close to where they live, so I see them on weekends. No complaints there. My dad has tried reaching out to me a bunch of times, not to say sorry, but to tell me I've ruined his life and that I should feel guilty about it. He wants me to talk to my grandparents to make sure he doesn't get cut out of the inheritance. He keeps sending me emails and messages from different accounts, but he doesn't get that being defensive isn't helping him. The only thing that could help is a real, heartfelt apology. But honestly, at this point, it's way too late for that. I'm just gonna keep ignoring him, honestly. It's not worth responding to him, and I don't have the time or energy to deal with his delusions anyway. I finally have the family I deserve, and I'm happy with them. I'm also enjoying my college life so far, so I'm gonna focus on the good stuff in my life right now and try to forget about my past, because I really just want to move on and do better for myself.